All right, let's dive into a court case that's over 125 years old, but, and you might find this surprising, it still has a huge say on where you can legally get a divorce today. You know, that question feels so incredibly modern, doesn't it, in our world of easy travel and global careers. But this exact issue was actually at the heart of a massive legal fight within the British Empire way back in 1895. So let's meet the people at the center of all this, Mr. and Mrs. Le Mesurier. They were British citizens, but they were living and working in the colony of Ceylon, what we know today as Sri Lanka. So when their marriage hit the rocks, Mr. Le Mesurier packed his bags, went back to England, and got a divorce from an English court. But his wife, who was still back in Ceylon, said not so fast. She challenged the whole thing, arguing that an English court had no power over them because their real home wasn't England at all. It was Ceylon. And just like that, what started as a very personal problem between two people blew up into this giant legal puzzle for the entire British Empire. I mean, which court was right? Who actually had the authority here? The whole case, literally everything, boiled down to the difference between two very important legal ideas. Your residence, which is just where you happen to be living, and your domicile, which is where your permanent home is. The husband's argument was pretty simple, right? He said, look, I was living in England when I filed for divorce, so the English court gets to decide. But his wife's argument was much more powerful. She said, for something as serious as ending a marriage, it's not about where you are temporarily. It's about where your permanent home is. Only that court has the real authority. And this idea of domicile is so interesting. It's not just your mailing address. It's like your legal center of gravity. It's the one place in the world that you consider your true, permanent home base. And that little distinction, it meant everything in this case. Now, this was way too big of a deal for the local courts to handle. The question was so important that the case climbed all the way up the legal ladder to the highest court in the entire British Empire. Okay, so let's track its journey. First, the court in England grants the divorce. Then, the Supreme Court in Ceylon says, nope, that's invalid, siding with Mrs. Le Mesurier. Of course, the husband wasn't going to take that line down, so he made one last huge appeal to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, which was the final legal stop for the entire empire. You have to understand, the Privy Council wasn't just settling a squabble between a husband and wife. They were facing this enormous question: how do we create one single clear rule for divorce? Because if they didn't, you could have total chaos, right? People could be legally married in one colony and divorced in another. And this is where the court makes a move that honestly creates legal ripples that are still felt over a century later. So the verdict comes in, and it's a big one. They sided completely with Mrs. Le Mesurier and the court in Ceylon. The English divorce, totally invalid. And why? Because the English court, they ruled, just didn't have the right kind of authority to make that call. And this quote from the judgment just lays it all out crystal clear. This is the core reason for their decision, what lawyers call the ratio decidendi. They state it plainly. When it comes to marriage, it all comes down to domicile, not where you happen to be living and not even your citizenship. And boom, just like that, the domicile principle was born. The law was now settled. The one and only place you could legally get divorced was in the courts of your permanent home, period. So a clear rule gets made. That's great. But why are we still talking about this case today? Well, because its impact was, and I'm not exaggerating, absolutely massive. I mean, this single decision became the gold standard. It set the precedent for divorce law not just in Ceylon, but across the entire British Empire, creating a clear, universal test for a very messy and personal part of life. But on another level, this case is also a really fascinating look at how empires work. By setting this one legal standard in London, this domicile test, and applying it everywhere, the empire was able to create this consistent legal framework that, in a subtle way, strengthened its control across all of its lands. So, if there's one big thing to take away from all this, it's that the simple question, where is your home, is actually an incredibly powerful legal idea. How you answer it can literally change the course of someone's life. And in this instance, it shaped the law for millions of people. And that really leaves us with a huge question for our own time. In the 21st century, where we live and work and have families all over the planet, does this 19th century idea of a single permanent home base even make sense anymore? It's a tough problem, and it's one that courts all over the world are still wrestling with today.